What's up, everybody? Welcome into the Next Pats podcast. I'm Phil Perry, coming at you once again from Super Bowl 57 on Radio Row here in Phoenix, Arizona. We've got a couple great guests that I think you're going to love in this edition of Next Pats. We're going to start out with the Hall of Famer, friend of the Next Pats podcast, Kurt Warner, brings phenomenal insight yet again on what's going on with the Patriots right now, why things should be different with Bill O'Brien now that he's in the fold to help Mac Jones along in year 3. What is Mac Jones's ceiling? Kurt Warner dishes on that, as well as how he feels Bill Belichick has done his job over the course of the last 3 years since Tom Brady has departed. We're also talking to Pro Football Focus's Steve Palazzolo to get the analytics perspective on where the Patriots are at right now. But first, let's get to our conversation with Kurt Warner. All right, very happy now to have with us Hall of Famer Kurt Warner. Kurt, thanks so much for being with us.
You got it. Good to be here.
Kurt, I remember talking to you mid-season this past season, watching the Patriots, and you telling us it just felt like some of the details offensively for them were lacking. Yeah. Now that we know Bill O'Brien is coming in to be offensive coordinator for the Patriots, how do you think things will change having an experienced guy in that role?
Well, I mean, I think, and you hope the first thing is that, Bill sits down with Mac and goes, okay, what did you like? What didn't you like? Why didn't you like it? Maybe it's just a complete overhaul. Maybe they're not going to do anything that they did this past year. But whatever it is, you want to sit down with your quarterback and go, I want to know what you're comfortable with, what you see, why you did certain things. Because I never believe a quarterback can play to his highest potential, that he never plays confident football if he doesn't truly believe in what you're doing and why you're doing it. And, and I felt like that at times last year is that, we all saw it. Mac didn't look like the Mac from a year before. And even on some of the simplest concepts that you just sit back and go, okay, why? Why can you not read the simplest concepts, which I know you can do? I've seen you do it. Why can you not do it this year, even though you did it last year? And you just wonder if, all of this stuff, just kind of got garbled into his mind because he didn't believe necessarily in what they were doing, and he didn't believe it played to his strengths. And so that to me has to be step number one, not just overhauling the offense, but going, Mac, I need to know who you are. I need to know what you're good at. And, these are the things that I like, and here's why, and piece together this offense around your quarterback, instead of just, here's what we're going to do, go do it. Build around your guy, because I just think that's the only way that these guys can ascend to whatever level they can reach.
Getting that belief or that buy-in, that's something Bill Belichick talks about all the time. Buy-in from players is critical. You have to have it to execute at the level that they're expecting. You mentioned the words highest potential, and you need that belief to get to that highest potential. What do you think is Mac Jones's highest potential? Do you have a grasp on that after 2 years for him?
I don't know if we do. I don't think we ever really know what a guy's potential is until we see him play 3 or 4 years. We can, see, 1 year and then the next, and one can be great, one can be bad, or vice versa. Like we're looking at Jalen Hurts in the Super Bowl. Last year, he was okay. This year, he was great. Now the question is, what do we get next year? Because I got 1 year of both. The hope is what we've seen this year is who he is the rest of his career. But I've seen lots of guys, that, have been down here, and then they have that one great season, and then they go back down here, and this is who they are the entirety of their career. So I don't think we really know. I think we saw so many great things from Mac last year as a rookie that we said, oh man, if he can do this as a rookie, how far can he go? And then you have the step back. And so I think right now it's just I want to see these guys level out, because at some point you become what you are, strides, up at certain times, or maybe a dip here, but we start to know who guys are. But I don't think you really know that until, year 4 or so in the National Football League. And you go, okay, I've seen it enough now that this is where I believe he fits, or what I can expect from him every single time out.
Somebody who has a much longer resume, who we also talk about quite a bit back at home, is Bill Belichick. Patriots now not in the postseason 2 out of the last 3 years. It feels like ownership getting a little antsy. They've made it clear they want to get back into January and be making noise in January. What have you made of the job that Bill Belichick has done these last 3 years since Tom Brady's departed?
They're still good every year. They're still competitive every year. They still have a really good defense every year. What I make of it is they don't have Tom Brady. And, we can say, you can look at it 2 ways. You can look at it like, it's Tom Brady. And you can say, well, Tom was a bigger part of it than Bill, whatever you want to say. Tom Brady is the greatest quarterback and greatest winner that we've seen in our game. And so, oh gosh, you took a step back because you don't have Tom Brady? Well, yeah, you did. And then the second thing is you don't have a guy to replace Tom Brady. And again, this isn't a knock on Mac because I like Mac, but Mac hasn't played at, anywhere close to an elite level, even with a good rookie year. And so this is a quarterback-driven league. I don't care, where you play or what you do outside of select situations where you might have a great defense and a great run game and you can get by with average quarterback play. You can't anymore. And, especially in the AFC with where the AFC is right now. And so, I still think they're doing a good job in staying competitive. They need to get a little bit more talent, especially at the skill positions, to be more explosive, because that's the other hard thing it's hard to get 10 and 12 play drives every single time you have to play a game and think you're going to score. All it takes is one mistake here or there and it's over. And they haven't had those guys, so now you're asking your quarterback to not only play at a higher level, but also make up for some of the lack of talent that you have offensively. And oh yeah, we've got all these great, stud quarterbacks in the AFC that you're going to have to dethrone if you're going to win games too. So, again, I think Bill always does a good job, and he always makes them competitive with what they do defensively, which is obviously his strength. Now the bottom line is they got to fix the offense again. And, whether that's fixing the scheme and what they tried last year, or maybe it's just finding that quarterback or getting Mac to that level where now we complement our defense, which is what they always did. When they won with Tom early on, I know as well as anybody, it wasn't about Tom early on. It was about their defense. And every time they went to a Super Bowl, they had Tom and a defense. It wasn't just Tom carrying them either. And so that becomes a huge part of, being successful and winning championships and going further and further in the playoffs, especially against teams that are built around really good quarterbacks. And we see a lot of really good quarterbacks in the AFC.
Kurt Warner, great insight as always. Thank you so much. Catch Kurt all week on NFL Network during Super Bowl week here. Great to have you.
You got it.
Great stuff there from Kurt, as always. I love hearing about, especially from the player's perspective, especially from a Hall of Fame level player's perspective, about buy-in, about belief is how Kurt Warner put it. But as soon as Bill O'Brien gets into the building, things should be different because Mac Jones will believe in what he's seeing, what he's hearing, what he's learning from Bill O'Brien. We're going to have even more points of view on that very topic on NBCSportsBoston.com in a story that I'm cooking up right as we speak. So make sure you head over to our website and you check that out. Now let's get to our conversation with Steve Palazzolo. A lot of fun with Steve as always. He's telling us what we can learn about team building from this week's Super Bowl and the participants here, as well as the Bill Belichick performance angle. How are things looking from an analytical perspective in terms of Bill Belichick's role on the sidelines? Is he as aggressive as he has been in years past? How does he view, or what does he value, I should say, in terms of the way he builds his Patriots teams year after year? Had a great time with Steve. Check out this conversation. Very excited now to have our good friend Steve Palazzolo, Pro Football Focus, here on Next Pats with us. Steve, thanks so much for hanging out. It feels like I just saw you.
Oh, yeah. The home and home, as you described. You were on our podcast. I'm with you, so it's good to be here.
We have to ask you about the quarterback because basically everything we do revolves around the quarterback in New England, and the quarterback just had a little bit of a weird year.
Yeah.
Not sure if you're familiar. How does Pro Football Focus look at Mac Jones and his performance from last year? Obviously, you guys are grading everything that happens on the field. I would imagine it's hard, if not impossible, to incorporate the coaching situation into those grades. So tell us what PFF feels about Mac Jones.
Yeah, I don't know if we're going to have anything more enlightening than probably what Patriots fans feel, which was like, hey, encouraging rookie season. Second year didn't go as planned. Let's blame the coaches because all of that stuff does matter. I think my question for Mac Jones is he was better probably in the first 10 or 12 games of his rookie season, kind of tapered off a little bit down the stretch. I thought he played well in the playoff game, even though it didn't matter against Buffalo. And then this year, it kind of was a lost season, right? You didn't get to see a whole lot. There were, from a player evaluation standpoint, some concerning signs, but we know a lot of the underlying reasons. So I don't think we learned a lot about Mac Jones. But I think at the end of the day, he's probably a good enough quarterback to win with, but there's a lot of those types of quarterbacks in the NFL, and everything around them usually needs to be pristine to really win and make a run.
Which is why this week is interesting to me, and I think interesting for Patriots fans, is because it wasn't all that long ago that the Eagles had one of the worst passing attacks in all of football, and they drafted a quarterback in the second round who's getting compared to Tim Tebow, and he's still a guy, I think, that a lot of people in the league have questions about just how good a passer Jalen Hurts is, but he's in a phenomenal situation. So does a situation like that one, like the one the Eagles are going through right now, maybe give the Patriots hope if they're able to improve things around Mac Jones in such a way, and in pretty short order? Again, they go from 4-11 to 9-8 to 14-2 in the Super Bowl. The Eagles did.
Right.
I don't know if the Patriots are going to be able to pull that off, but should Patriots fans have hope because of what they're seeing the Eagles do right now?
Yeah, the Eagles were supposed to be rebuilding a couple years ago, and then they snuck into the playoffs in 21, and here they are in the Super Bowl in 22. I will say the Jalen Hurts specific situation, he helps a little bit with his mobility, and they've built that system around his mobility. But I think the underlying pattern from the Eagles was they have always had a really good offensive line, and then the Eagles back in 2017, hate to bring it up, their offensive line was awesome then too, but then they had the playmakers on the outside. I think that is the pattern. That was what the Bills did with Josh Allen. They spent their first offseason getting the offensive line back to good enough, and then they started going to get the Cole Beasleys and John Browns, and then of course Stephon Diggs of the world. To me, that's the pattern of the first contract quarterback, getting them stability up front, which New England usually has, right? It was different this year, but they're usually pretty good up front. But even the Patriots teams that were better in the playoffs had better perimeter players, had better playmakers, had a healthy Gronk, and I think the playmaker situation, that's where the Eagles going to get A.J. Brown, drafting Devontae Smith in the first round, that's what's added up and made them such a dangerous team right now.
I'm curious, when you guys are breaking things down, and you guys do so much in terms of team building and what matters and what's most valuable, and obviously the quarterback is right at the top of the list. But at what point is it worth it to do something that the Eagles did, which was they had a quarterback who was making a lot of money, and then they still spent not a first-round pick, but a second-round pick, a valuable pick, on that position? How do you guys look at it? How does the analytics community look at that position? Like, Mac Jones is going into his third year. Important year. You got to figure out by the end of that thing whether or not you're picking up his fifth-year option on it. But if they get into the draft this year, even after drafting Bailey Zappi last year, if the right player gets to them in the second round, should they be considering that kind of choice, or should they be focused on what you were just talking about, which is building up the situation around the guy that you took in the first round a couple years ago?
Both, as much as possible.
That's not an answer, Steve.
The Eagles drafting Jalen Hurts in the second round, they weren't doing it to push Carson Wentz. They weren't doing it because they were like, oh, we'll hedge our bet. They were doing it to me, and, based off reports, as just it's a process pick. We're getting a backup quarterback who, by the way, the best case scenario could play out, which is exactly what played out right now. You've got this first contract quarterback that we can now invest in other parts of the team, and here we are going to the Super Bowl. So this will sound crazy, but I would always draft quarterbacks, even high, right? Even in the second round, potentially even in the first round, even if it makes things uncomfortable.
Even if it means you miss out on a receiver
even
or
if you did
an
miss out on a
offensive lineman
receiver.
who could play.
Yeah, and I don't think teams are going to do this. But, it's like in the NBA, right? If the goal is a championship, in the NBA, if you don't have 2 or 3 stars, you're doing everything you can to make sure that you get them, right? Whether it's through the draft or creating an ecosystem where a free agent's going to come in. And NFL teams need to do that with quarterbacks. Until you have a guy that is your guy, that's like a top 6 to 8 guy, because that's when it becomes just a far bigger advantage. And unfortunately, now you don't know from Mac Jones if he's that guy or not. And then if you don't do that, get some receivers. That's where you go.
Should there be hope that Mac Jones could be that guy? I'll just relay one thing that I just heard from a quarterbacks coach I was talking to today say to me, if Mac Jones can get back to where he was as a rookie, where he performed well in a really difficult system as a rookie, and he said, look back at quarterbacks who played early in Josh McDaniels' offense, whether it was Derek Carr this year, and I'd actually love to ask you about his grade and his performance this year, or St. Louis, years ago, or Denver early. They put a lot, or Josh specifically, puts a lot on the quarterback. And so for Mac Jones to have shown what he showed, even though he did tail off at the end, was pretty impressive in terms of his ability to make good decisions and to process. Is that enough to get into that 6 to 8 range that you're talking about?
6 to 8's tough, man. I mean, that is, like, look around the NFL. That's like Josh Allen is the guy in Buffalo. He's one of those guys. Joe Burrow in Cincinnati. And I know that's the guy that we want to make the biggest comparisons to. That's where everybody across the NFL, like Pittsburgh people, are saying, well, Kenny Pickett could be Joe Burrow. In New England, you guys are saying Mac Jones can be Joe Burrow.
Get him a Jamar Chase and a T. Higgins, Steve.
But maybe.
You never know.
So let's say we do go that route. And there's something to the McDaniels thing. And I was most impressed with Mac Jones when he was running no huddle in just the first preseason game as a rookie, right? And they had, that practice against the Giants where he just, threw the ball 55 times and didn't miss and all that stuff. There are some special things about Mac Jones. So let's say they go the route about, building around him and all that stuff, which is fine. You have to be aggressive with that. And I think like what A.J. Brown did to the Eagles and what Tyreek Hill did for the Dolphins is completely transform those offenses. And I'm not saying you only can do it with a true wide receiver one, but you really tactically want to have 3 or 4 legitimate pass game weapons who you can't cover. And it changes the defense. And can Mac Jones be that distributor and accurate passer that's going to take advantage of that? Absolutely. So I think you have to be aggressive on the perimeter. You're not going to have seasons like 2018 where Tom Brady's going to take a team with Cordero Patterson on the outside and Philip Dorsett on the outside. I don't think you're going to see that from Mac Jones. But if you give him, say, what Dak Prescott had a couple years ago, Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, Michael Gallup, and a decent tight end, to me, it sounds like fantasy football, but I think that's the reality of football. With about 10 or 12 quarterbacks in the NFL, you have to pursue that to try to create offense.
How bad was Derek Carr last year?
It was his worst grade since his rookie season. His worst grade. And so I'm raving about go get the playmakers.
Yeah,
the Raiders did.
He had what you're talking about.
Now, he never had Darren Waller on the field for most of the year, Hunter Renfrow. And if they had those two guys plus Devontae Adams, who was still spectacular, maybe things were a little bit different. But it is discouraging for Carr and maybe for Josh McDaniel, like that they got the worst season out of Derek Carr since his rookie year back in 2014.
And again, maybe just an indication of there's a lot on the quarterback in that offense. And so there's a lot going on, even for a veteran guy like Derek Carr. Last thing I wanted to ask you is about Bill Belichick. What is the analytics community's feeling on Bill Belichick right now? Because I think in terms of, and I'm sure you would have better numbers and better information and context than I would, but when it comes to things like being aggressive offensively in game, going for it on 4th down, where does he rank now? What are your feelings on Bill Belichick? You're from the area, Steve. You've followed Bill Belichick since he's been with the Patriots in 2000. What are your feelings on the guy now?
There was definitely a point, I think, between 2000 and 2010 where he was at the forefront of going for 4th downs. Not like people are now, but he was aggressive. We know the famous 4th and 2 in 2009. He's definitely well below average when it comes to aggressiveness right now. Punts around midfield and things like that. Every now and again, he'll go for it, be a little bit more aggressive. I think he's on the low end of that. Where he's been historically good. It's tough to judge coaches outside of wins, right? You should judge him by wins, but we know how much Tom Brady affects that. He does get the most out of like the middle of your roster. He's always been good at that, and that goes unheralded, So he's been good at that. But as far as like the easiest things to see, 4th down decisions and everything, I think Belichick's been a little bit behind the aggressiveness that I think is the right way to play that, and other coaches are showing that around the league.
So do the Patriots not get the same advantage of having Bill Belichick as their head coach as maybe they did a few years ago?
There's a lot to that, right? I mean, I think him taking guys like J.C. Jackson and turning them into players, like there's still a little bit of that magic, right? Where he has maximized the players. Even the defense this year, on paper, should not have been that good. Whoever you want to give that credit to, if it's Belichick, if it's Mayo, whoever you want to give that credit to, there's a history of that with Belichick. So I still think that there are advantages. But the biggest advantage was Tom Brady, and that's gone. So those advantages need to be really good every single year to get back to where Patriots fans want to go.
Who would Pro Football Focus say is like the best? Like, what would be the top 5 coaches in football right now?
I think Andy Reid's up there. John Harbaugh, I think, is up there, right? I mean, no matter when you look at coaches and metrics and all that stuff, it does. No matter how you run the numbers, it does skew to the guys who had the better quarterbacks. But John Harbaugh's won with multiple quarterbacks. Andy Reid's won with multiple quarterbacks. Kyle Shanahan has created offense with multiple quarterbacks. I lean on those guys. I think Mike Vrabel has done a great job. Even though they collapsed this year, he's really maximized that roster in Tennessee.
So Bill
Tomlin's up there, and Bill's up there too. Of course, he gets
all
credit.
Right, you got 7 in your top 5 now, though, Steve.
That was 5, 6
for an analytics guy. I mean, come on, let's figure out the math. All right, Steve Palazzolo, thanks so much for being with us here at Next Bats, man.
Thank you.
Always fun to challenge a math guy on simple addition and subtraction, as we did with Steve right there. Hopefully he'll join us in the future. Maybe he's just so embarrassed now that he'll never be back. But, well, we love Steve. We had a great time with Steve. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully you enjoyed this podcast. We'll be talking to you very soon on another edition of Next Pats. Maybe in the next 12 hours or so. We're just churning things out right now here on Radio Row. We're having a lot of fun. Hopefully you're having fun listening.